Good morning, everyone. There's been a slight change in the order of service, so today we will be starting with Dr. Gary Smart and Jennifer Bacmeister performing a familiar tune from Mary Poppins titled Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Take it away, Gary and Jennifer. Thank you, Gary and Jennifer. That was a fun one. I'd like to start us out this morning with our opening words, which are number 434 in your gray hymnal. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. And now I invite everyone to please rise and body your spirit to sing our opening hymn, number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. We will be singing all 4 verses. And now I would like to invite our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Beth Curtis, up to the pulpit to share our story for all ages.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning. Beacon selected a wonderful book for us to read this week as part of the service today. I love this book. It's always delightful reading a banned book. It's called Red, a Crayon Story, written and illustrated by Michael Hall. He was red, but he wasn't very good at it. "Oh dear," says Olive. His teacher thought he needed more practice. Scarlet says, "I'll draw a red strawberry and you draw a red strawberry. You can do this, really." But he couldn't, really. "Like this?" Red asks. "Oh my, let's start again," says Scarlet. His mother thought he needed to mix with other colors. "Now why don't you two go out and draw a nice round orange?" "A really big one," says Yellow. "A really orange one," says Red. "Oh, but they made a big greenish one." "Oh, yuck," says Yellow. "Oops," says Red. His grandparents thought he wasn't warm enough. "Your class is making self-portraits for parents' night. Now wear this warm red scarf." That's how grandparents sound. "Nice, it's so you." "Oh, but it so wasn't. I think the blue portrait is the one that Red made. He's wearing a scarf, see?" Grandma is saying, "Oh, dear me." Everyone seemed to have something to say. Sometimes I don't wonder if he's not really red at all. "Oh, don't be silly. It says red on his label." "He came that way from the factory." Fuchsia says, "Well, frankly, I don't think he's very bright." Grape says, "Well, I think he's lazy." Army Green says, "Right, he's got to press harder." Steel Gray says, "Really apply himself. Give him time, he'll catch on." "Of course he will." Oh, but he didn't catch on. Green Frog says green, Black Sheep says black, Brown says brown cow, Red says ack. All the art supplies wanted to help. The masking tape thought that he was broken inside. "Here, this will help hold you together." The scissors thought his label was too tight. "One snip will do it." And I being the pencil sharpener, thought he wasn't sharp enough. "Now say still now." But even with all our help and all his hard work, oh, he just couldn't get the hang of it. Oh, it looks like he's so frustrated. Now one day, he met a new friend. "Will you make a blue ocean for my boat?" asked Barry. "I can't. I'm red." "Well, will you try?" So he did. "Thank you, that's perfect." "Well, you're welcome. It was easy." And Red didn't stop there. "Look at the blue bells, blue jeans, blue birds, blueberries, blue whale. I'm blue," said Red. He was red. He was blue. He was blue. And everyone was talking. "My son is brilliant. Who could have known he was blue?" "I always thought he was blue." It was obvious. His blue ocean really lifted me. All of his work makes me happy. His blue strawberries are my favorite. He's so intense. I'm going to make a green lizard with him. I mean, a really big green one. I hear he's been working on a new project. He's really reaching for the sky. And he was. The end.
Good morning again, everyone. My name is Hannalora Chapple, and I will be your youth worship leader this morning. Welcome to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or BBUUC for short. We are so happy to have you with us this morning. I am so excited to present this service to you because it's going to be a little different today. We have BBUUC's very own Beacon Youth Group here collaborating. As Unitarian Universalists, we value growth, just as the growth of youth, the growth we find in ourselves. Our religion also grows with us as a living tradition. As many of you may have noticed, the order of service is a little different today than our usual principles. This is another representation of the growth and change of our religion as our UU values are growing to suit us and our community. This is a transition into a new adjustment of our faith. For more information, you may refer to the insert in your order of service. As we discuss growth and discovery here today, you may be new to discovering Unitarian Universalism, or maybe you are interested in learning more about it. If so, please feel free to stop by our welcome table over by the entryway, where you can pick up some literature about our church and our denomination. While you are there, we invite you to please grab a name tag so that we may get to know you by name. We also offer regular Learn About Us classes for those who are curious about learning about our congregation and our faith. And before I proceed any further, please make sure that you silence your electronic devices. We light our chalice each Sunday morning as a symbol of our faith. I'd like to invite Alyx Stansberry up to light our chalice this morning. Our words today are by Cynthia Landrum. We light this chalice, the beacon that calls us to love, to justice, to deepening the spirit. We also recite our congregational covenant each Sunday to practice and restate our mission. Please recite your covenant along with me, and the words are printed in your order of service. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and to practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. And now, please rise and body your spirit to sing our call to worship. The words are also printed in your order of service. Thank you again, Gary and Jennifer. It was beautiful. Our church is a place we gather together, but it is also so much more. It is a place we shelter in each Sunday morning in togetherness and in community. Each Sunday, we have the opportunity to give back. You may choose to place an offering in our plates as they are passed around, or you may visit our website at BBUUC.org and then click the donate link. However you choose to give, we greatly appreciate it. Once our offering is complete, please rise in body or spirit to sing our offertory hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. I would now like to invite John Ridington and Ron Furster up to receive the offerings. Before we begin with our sermon today, I wanted to introduce Beacon Youth Group first. Beacon is BBUUC's youth group with an age range that spreads from 12 to 20 years old. Beacon is not only an amazing environment where youth can make friends, but it is also a very powerful community of people. Beacon is a group that strives for youth empowerment. The youth in Beacon are the ones who do the work, plan, organize, and participate in events. Beacon's advisors step in to make sure that lines are not crossed, though they always make sure to leave the floor open so that the youth can thrive. Now, Beacon also plans social action trips, such as feeding the homeless, and they have fun while doing it. And now I would like to hand over the mic to our first speaker and member of Beacon, Vesper Thomas, who will be discussing the topic of gender versus sex.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vesper Thomas, and I've come to talk to you about a misconception I hear a lot as a person in the transgender community. This is the phrase, "you are what you're born as." I think anybody who has at least questioned their gender has heard that one. In the minds of those saying it, this is common sense. It's obvious, right? Gender does equate to what it says on your birth certificate, male and female. To those who spread this message, what those who spread this message don't know is that they're talking about sex, and sex is a very different thing from gender. Sex is biological, and what determines sex is sex characteristics like chromosomes, sex organs, and hormones in some cases. But even sex isn't black and white. Did you know that there's a third sex category? There's male, female, and intersex. Intersex is when someone is born with sex characteristics that don't quite match male or female. They may have chromosomes that say they are male, but they have female organs, sex organs. They may have both female and male sex organs. Some have chromosomes that don't match typical male or female chromosome patterns, or they may have no sex organs at all. Intersex can look like many things and is a spectrum. Sex being more gray than black and white is usually how I introduce the idea of gender versus sex to people. It opens up the mind to more possibilities. And now to gender, which is a big, lovely spectrum in of itself. The biggest difference between the two is that sex, as I said before, is biological. Gender is a social construct. Boy and girl. These are genders both made up from the need for humanity to categorize things that look similar. For most cis people, gender correlates with sex. They may be female, and to them they identify most with being a girl or woman, vice versa with males who identify as boys or men. Gender identity really boils down to what you feel inside. Me, I'm gender fluid. This means that my gender identity changes quite frequently. I could wake up one morning and feel very connected to being a woman, and being called she, her makes me happy. Then I can go about my day and look in the mirror and realize I don't like how I'm presenting anymore. Or being called she, her feels more wrong than it did. That's when I realize I feel more connected to being a man at that point in the day. I may change my gender presentation to reflect that, which leads me to my next point. Gender presentation is how you express your gender to the world. Maybe this is wearing dresses or sporting a dad shirt. This may be binding, which is the flattening of breasts, or it may be getting a haircut that makes you feel more feminine. It's what makes you comfortable and happy. What makes you feel more connected to your gender identity. For me, makeup and clothes are how I express my gender most frequently. Eyeliner and lip gloss help me feel more connected to being a woman, and combat boots and big shirts help me feel more like a man. Like everything in life, gender and sex are spectrums. Everyone has the right to identify and express themselves how they choose, and what we can do to help is simply try to understand. I will be in the back of the sanctuary after the service if you need clarity on something or simply want to continue the conversation. Thank you for listening, And now I'd like to pass on the conversation to Alyx Stansberry, who is talking about asexuality and hypersexuality.
Hi, my name is Alyx, and I'm asexual. I've known I'm asexual for about 3 years now, but I'm still learning what asexuality means to me. Allow me to explain what that is. Sexual attraction, it's common. Almost everyone experiences it. It's a spectrum, and like any spectrum, there's also an absence. The absence of sexual attraction is referred to as asexuality. In other words, an asexual person is someone who experiences little to no sexual attraction. The deeper meaning, can be different for everyone. For me, it simply means that while I do not perceive people as sexually attractive, I can still find things, words, or actions attractive. Sex drive does not equal sexual attraction, and I learned this when an ex of mine denied my asexual identity due to my high sex drive in that relationship. Hypersexuality is a trauma response, where one's sex drive goes into overdrive. The person typically oversexualizes themselves, sometimes for another's attention or benefit. But how do sex drive and sexual attraction interact? An asexual person can have just as high a sex drive as an allosexual, which is someone who experiences the quote-unquote normal amount of attraction, or as little a sex drive as someone sex repulsed. Anyone can, really. What makes an asexual person asexual isn't how often they do the deed or how often they think of it. Anyone can have sex, can think of it. Almost anyone can enjoy sex, find pleasure and happiness from it. For me, to be asexual is completely the absence of attraction to people. The relationship between being hypersexual while simultaneously being an asexual person is difficult to explain and describe. My experience with being asexual can be described as confusion. My first kiss, I was confused why it wasn't what it was described as. It was just flesh, skin touching. I hadn't realized, but the wetness was gross. I admittedly shied away from kisses after that. Being asexual is confusing because in books and stories, all you hear are things, oh, he was so hot, but you can't fathom how someone can be hot when they're just people. They're just flesh. Meanwhile, being hypersexual, my experience at least, is wanting to be intimate with someone, but in such an extreme, it's all you can think about. And this can last for days, for weeks, or even months, sometimes for years. It can be exhausting and can sometimes be considered self-destructive in some scenarios. Relationships can be neglected, others can rely too heavily on intimacy, on sex, and in the end, you can end up alone. And I'm gonna pass this conversation over to Laura Spade on being transgender.
Good morning. My legal bought and paid for name is Lauren Carey Spade. You can call me Lore, L-O-R-E, the name my brother gave me as a child. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a trans man. I'm a member here at Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church and have had the privilege of attending on and off since I was 12. On my first Sunday, when guests were asked to stand and introduce themselves, my brother, Ed, slender, and in his dress clothes, introduced me, wearing a hunter green velvet skirt and matching jacket with long hair. Years later, Joyce Johnson, the advisor then, would admit she thought we were a young married couple. We went downstairs to a tiny basement and discussed current events and world religions. I couldn't get enough of this new environment, not the dark, dank basement that flooded during the spring and summer months, but the people. Sunday mornings turned into youth group in the afternoons and Wednesday nights. The youth group was ages 12 to 20 and called Young Religious Unitarian Universalists, or Why Are You You? These youth were brilliant, not unlike our current youth. They were contemplating the universe. They had opinions. They wanted to do community projects because they believed that being complacent contributes to the problems of the world. And most importantly, they didn't use gay as a slur. As teenagers do, I was figuring out my authentic self, or at least getting as close as I could. I identified as a butch lesbian who really hated their breasts. Society and my family were more comfortable with long hair and gender-appropriate clothes. I was rocking men's khakis, Vans, and church conference shirts with a surfer cut at age 16. I won't tell you everyone liked my haircut, because that would be a lie. But my church friends thought I looked amazing and authentically me. Now more than ever, these inclusive, safe spaces are needed for youth and adults alike. With transgender and gender nonconforming people becoming more visible in the community, we are experiencing more discrimination and violence. In an increasingly hostile political and social climate, our beloved community must stand up and take action. Don't Say Gay and book bans are threatening to erase LGBTQIA voices. Life-saving medical care for those wishing to transition is challenging to access and navigate. It is costly and parts are not covered by insurance. There are new laws that are requiring driver's licenses to have a person's biological sex on it, requiring transgender people to out themselves to perfect strangers every time we are ID'd, making us vulnerable to attack. Bathroom bans make going in public places daunting, with threats of steep fines, jail time, and potential violence. Discrimination in employment is silent and pervasive. I've had passing privilege for about 3 years. This means I can navigate most spaces without people knowing I'm trans. For instance, my boss has no idea, and he is a medically trained doctor. Since I have been able to dress myself, Since I've been able to dress myself and have self-expression, I have looked queer. Now, after medically transitioning, I look like your run-of-the-mill 30-something-year-old white man who plays golf. Believe me, I can feel the difference in the way the world treats me. When the youth asked me to be involved, they asked me how I identified sexually. Am I a straight man or a lesbian, or am I a trans man? I said, I'm married to a bisexual woman, and I'm a trans man, because that's the box that fits the best. So this morning, I hope that's clear as mud for you. Testosterone has not only changed my voice, but those who are willing to listen to it. So do you have stealth privilege with your beliefs? What do you do with this privilege? How do we love our LGBTQIA siblings? How are we being active in our community, showing up as allies? Are we speaking up for transgender and gender nonconforming people when they are the target of ridicule in the workplace? Do you support LGBTQIA-friendly businesses? And do you have an inclusive pride flag so some of the most marginalized people can feel welcomed? Do you go to parades or pride events? Do you boycott businesses that lobby for discriminatory practices? Do you vote? I know in my own experience I have fallen short. I may not always have been brave enough to say I'm transgender when someone is talking about how disgusting transgender people are in the workplace. I have chosen safety over being my authentic self. And I have had Chick-fil-A too. I remember being 12 years old and being so uncomfortable in my own clothes and skin. I was so lucky to come to the most loving church that gave me a safe space to be when the world was telling me I was wrong. It was so simple as seeing a rainbow flag displayed, meeting other LGBTQIA people in a space, and being treated as a valid person with inherent worth and dignity. Please let me introduce Hannalora to finish us out.
All right, I would now like to invite Ashton Jones and Brooke Lucker-Palmer to distribute the bells. Now, at the end of the sermon, Beacon has created an activity for us to do. After this section, this activity will begin, so please try to keep the bells quiet for right now. I know, it's fun. And while they distribute those, I will conclude with this final section. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But who am I? Hello, everyone, and as I mentioned earlier, my name is Hannalora Chapple. I am an ally of the LGBTQ+ community. Today, we heard some beautiful words from our Beacon members, and the topics discussed here today are so different for each and every one of us, though we all experience these types of things in our lives. Our gender, sex, and sexuality are important parts of who we are, and also how we present ourselves. Now, as an ally, I haven't shared the same experiences as those who are LGBTQ+, so I decided to start researching on what we all have experience with, our senses of self and our identity. As I started my research, it seemed that I was out of luck. I couldn't find any credible sources exposing information on how we identify ourselves or how we understand our sense of self. The only things that came up were from .com and .org websites. I never view information from these sources as factual or credible, so I continued along with my search, feeling defeated. Eventually, I did find something that caught my eye. There were 2 questions brought up in an article from the Open University, and as UUs, we love our questions. They ask, quote, "Are we essentially the same person with a fairly constant idea of ourselves, which changes little in situations? Or is our identity complex and changing, transformed by the way in which we respond to similarities and differences between ourselves and those around us?" Pushing past its wordiness, I started to ponder these questions. Are we a people whose identity is constant? Do we go about our days with a strong feeling of our sense of self? Depending on situations we're in, do our identities remain structured? Or do we go about our days as if in a common flow switch and change the knowledge of who we are? Do our identities adjust with what we go through? I don't know. I don't know the answers to these questions, and this is because we are all so different. Each and every one of us is unique. We cannot use words and apply them to everyone else. What does this have to do with self-discovery, you may ask? Of course, it is the title of this sermon. Allow me to explain. Earlier, we heard much differences in gender, sex, and sexuality, all of which make up ourselves. With this information and some guide, we can reflect on those questions I stated earlier. Are we a people whose identity is constant, or are we a people whose identity is changing? Instead of answering this question for those around us, we can answer this question for ourselves as individuals. And with this answer, we may think about what brings us joy, what makes us comfortable in our skin. Whatever is on our minds, we can use this with thinking and questioning, safe spaces for those who are questioning who they are, and safe spaces for those who know their identity. And we can ultimately find what makes us us. Now, Beacon has come up with some questions and experiences, and as I read off this list, please feel free to ring your bell if any of it resonates with you. Has someone ever mansplained your identity to you? Have you ever felt guilty for not standing up when you saw someone being hurt or put down? Have you ever been hurt yourself? Have you ever felt that you had to repress yourself? Have you ever been bullied? Have you ever been denied your identity? Have you ever been followed into a bathroom? Have you ever been worried that an authoritative figure might target you? Have you ever been a target? Have you ever been robbed of an opportunity that was out of your control? Have you ever felt that your identity wasn't valid? Have you ever lost a friend over your identity? Have you ever felt alone? Have you ever looked into the mirror and loved yourself? Have you ever found an interest that you thought you never would have had? Have you ever been close to someone who accepts you? Have you ever been proud of your identity? And that will conclude our activity. Thank you to anyone who participated. Now, since our service is being concluded shortly, once it's done, would you please drop off your bells, which will be in the baskets at the end tables behind you. And now, thank you. I'd like to invite our worship leaders up and ask for everyone to please rise in body or spirit to sing our final hymn this morning, 118, This Little Light of Mine. We will be singing all 3 verses. Please remain standing for our Chalice extinguishing. I would like to invite Alyx Stansberry back up to extinguish our flame. Our closing words are by Deborah Burrell. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Thank you. Blessed be.